This is Author's Intentions and Literary Meaning by Sherri Irvin. In the Philosophy Compass back in 2006. As always, this is my first time reading it. Feel free to ask questions along the way. Introduction. Does a literary work mean just what its author intended it to mean? The short answer is no. Well, there we go. We're done. Word meanings are constrained by linguistic conventions and idiosyncratic intentions, whether the product of error or stubbornness, and can't simply make broccoli mean cauliflower. I actually wonder this. I mean, there's actually this, what's it called? It's called the Humpty Dumpty problem. It goes back to Lewis Carroll, who was a logician, by the way. And he, back in Alice and Through the Looking Glass, Humpty Dumpty just says, I can intend to mean whatever I want. And, that's your problem if you don't understand. So, you can do that. You're not going to communicate very well, but you can intend whatever the fuck you want. Actually. Now, you're just going to have a lot of trouble communicating, so you're going to fail at communicating, but can you intend to mean whatever you want? Well, you can define whatever you want. No one's stopping you from changing word meanings as you see fit. So, word meanings are constrained by linguistic conventions. It's true, but you can buck them if you really want to. So, there's already a question here. They're already stating a certain position in this area. Yeah, exactly, Raymond. There's other things that can be happy. Yellow broccoli and green cauliflower. Do not eat the yellow snow. Okay, however, the view that the author's intentions have an important role to play in fixing a work's meaning has been persistent. In this essay, I will assess the dominant views about the relationship, or lack thereof, between an author's intention and the meaning of literary works, and discuss the role that one's commitments about the nature of literature and the robustness of linguistic conventions should play in determining which of these views one embraces. Yeah, so again, they knew what they were doing. They're saying words generally aren't taken to mean whatever you want them to, but what the author does mean, what they intend, actually, people take this seriously. So that's what we're going to talk about. Texts and works. Most of this essay focuses on the relationship between the author's intentions and the meaning of literary works. However, a few words are in order about how something comes to be the literary work that it is in the first place. Is this the fucking... this is the Star Trek episode that always comes up about this, where the inhabitants of a planet just speak in idioms that are super hard to understand. So I was like, yeah. But that's right. So it's in pop culture too. Temba, his arms wide, exactly. If we construe a text as a string of characters, it is clear that a text is not yet rich enough to have a determinate meaning. A short string of characters may correspond to a word in more than one language. For instance, chair means chair in English, while in French it means flesh. And even the same string of words in English may... if I don't die. Same string of words in English may have different meanings depending upon the era in which it was generated, since conventions related to word meaning shift over time. Moreover, it might be appropriate to understand the same string of English words differently if on one occasion it is used to instantiate a political satire in prose and in the other a free verse poem. Shaka when the walls fell. Yeah. Chocolate says dialogue is helpful for feedback, but many things are monologues. Yeah. Yeah. So this is something else that came up recently when I was chatting with people at the workshop. They were saying you can always tell when there's someone who does not engage with other philosophers, because you can just see their work has obvious holes in it, and it's obviously got problems, and stuff that could have been fixed or should have been fixed or wouldn't have been hard to be fixed are still there. And so even though maybe they're smart, maybe they know what they're talking about, but the obvious pitfalls that should have been cleaned up are just not there, not been cleaned up. And that's part of the problem, is that other people are not a lot of stupid people, but there's people that they're trying to do the right thing and they're not trying to fuck you over. It's well, okay, you said this is kind of stupid. Can you fix that? It's yeah, you can fix that. You just had to know that oh, there was something I didn't know that other people have worked on, because it is kind of dumb. And so this is part of the issue here, is that it's not just convention, it's not just meaning, it's that there's stupid shit out there also that you need to avoid, that other people realize was stupid, and that you're getting dangerously close to saying something stupid. It's well, don't say that. Say something different. Okay. For these reasons, the author continues, it is appropriate to distinguish between mere texts and literary works. The same string of characters might potentially support more than one work. And whatever view one accepts about the role of authorial intentions in giving a particular literary work its meaning, one might accept a different view about the role of authorial intentions in making a text the literary work it is in the first place, giving it its identity. So, for example, Levinson holds that an author's actual semantic intentions do not fix the meaning of the work, but that the author's actual categorical intentions typically do determine the work's genre. Okay, so you might not really understand what you're doing in that exact instance, but you do kind of fix the area you're working on. I mean, that makes some sense. The views to be discussed below focus on the role, if any, of authorial intentions in fixing meaning, not on their role in determining such things as the language or genre of a work. Okay, so can we actually be like, I'm writing a work of analytic philosophy, this is going to be analytic philosophy, and that's the genre, but like, I'm going to write something on, the theory of reference, and this is going to be what I said it is, because that's what my meaning is. And that gets hard. I can see why. Like I was just saying, people say a lot of stupid shit and they don't realize it's stupid shit. But then again, maybe it's not so stupid, but you don't realize what direction you're on. Because only in hindsight do we be like, oh, all these people were working really on this other topic that we understand is important now. But back then it looked like something else. Chocolate says, meaning is where you stop telling the audience they are wrong. Yeah, perhaps. Like, is it just when the audience and you seem to get along? Is that what it is? Where, you may not be in agreement, but you just are all happy with whatever bullshit you both, you just accept that level of bullshit? Could be. So you don't tell them they're wrong, but you might both be, halfway up and shit. Up to the eyeballs, perhaps. Meaning and interpretation. This essay is primarily about meaning rather than interpretation as a whole. Interpretation is a complex enterprise, and there is much disagreement about its appropriate aims and products. Some theorists, critical monists, hold that there can be at most one correct or acceptable attribution of meaning to a work, while others, critical pluralists, hold that multiple, even conflicting meanings can acceptably be attributed to a work. Some critical pluralists, like Stecker, hold that the acceptability of diverse meanings is due, at least in part, to the fact that interpretation is not a single enterprise with one unified goal. Instead, it can legitimately aim at a variety of different targets, which might include the meaning intended by the author, the meanings carefully and well-informed audiences attribute to the work, or the meanings projected onto the work by audiences engaged in virtually unconstrained interpretive play. Viper says they just passed. Okay, good. Well, that's good that they actually got their act together. Now, will they do anything worthwhile? I don't know, but we needed to get the government employees paid. This is like... yeah, like we need to get like at least the government employees paid. Like these people are forced to work without pay. Like when the government shuts down, which for the United States of fucking America, you should not be forcing to work without pay, at least here. It's insane. So, like, we need to get these people at least back pay. Yeah, but that's good. Thank you for letting me know. Adam says, but the author's actual categorical intentions typically do determine work genre does imply the author isn't completely vague on what they were doing, or that they have no idea about the category either because the genre hasn't been established yet. Yes, but the paper isn't really on that. They said we're going to set that aside. We can assume that they may have some idea, but like that's fair. Like maybe the historical understanding will change, but you know, that's not the focus of the paper. So like yes, but I don't think it's going to matter here. So that would be like calling the Satyricon a novel. I don't know what the Satyricon is, but okay. Yeah, or then they're the first to engage in an unknown category. Exactly, Adam. It's like at that point, I think you're just sort of splitting hairs. It's like, yeah, they may have known what they were doing, and this is what they called it. We call it something else now, but that's just semantics. Like you say, okay, they called it this, but this is what like we mean by that now. You sent some sick leaving coming up, Coffee McCofferson. No, I've just had like my throat's been scratchy for like weeks at this point. It's not actually. I feel fine. Or calling what Aristotle wrote essays. Yeah, that's fair. It's that's part of the issue, is that even the literary forms have changed over time. So the meaning, we may understand some of Aristotle's meaning, but like what he was writing in, we were probably getting like compiled lecture notes, as that's what we think of his books as. So it's not even like clear what form he was writing in. He was definitely not writing essays. And apparently he had written other books, but we don't have those. Chocolate says the shutdown mechanic is the product of an attorney general's opinion back in the 80s. Yeah, I mean, it's not, I want no shutdowns. That would have been the target. Yeah, like, it's bad. Like, and we need, like, the idea that we're forcing people to work without pay in the United States of America is just like, given like the country, it's like, of course we're going to do that because we're assholes. But like, you know, like taxation without representation, it's like, okay, like we have no government, like our representation sucks and we're not getting paid. It's like madness. If the paper returns to the issue because intentions seem pivotal, yeah, I mean, that's part of the issue. Is, I mean, that's where we're coming back to it, is that what exactly does this author think intention matters? Like what they say it is. Does that matter? All right, but we've got a few different options here. The meaning of what the author thinks, the audience who's engaged thinks, and then the audience who is just like making shit up thinks. In what follows, I will not address the relative merits of critical monism and critical pluralism, or consider how broad and diverse the aims of interpretation should be. I will assume that at least one of the appropriate aims of interpretation is to ascertain the meanings of a work in a way that is responsive to the relevant evidence, whereas we shall see it is controversial accounts as relevant evidence, and that attributions of meaning can be criticized when they conflict or fail to account for that evidence. I am thus not concerned with the attribution of meaning on the bias of unconstrained interpretive play. Let's see if I can zoom this. There we go. A little bit better. In this essay, I will pit a number of views about work meaning against each other, examining the degree to which they are able to account for central intuitions about the meaning while avoiding pitfalls and withstanding objections. If in the end more than one of these views seems attractive, one response would be to hold sticker that meanings generated through more than one approach may acceptably be attributed to the work. Okay, so how narrow or wide should we attribute meanings? Should it be very narrow, or should there be multiple meanings possibly attributed to one piece of like work? Okay, the extreme end, actual intentionalism. Actual intentionalism, which we might call extreme actual intentionalism, to distinguish it from a view that will be discussed below, is the view that I summarily rejected above, namely that the author's intention simply determines the meaning of the work. I'll now take the time to reject it in greater detail, since the details of the debate may be instructive regarding the view which we should eventually adopt. In his early work on interpretation, E.D. Hirsch suggested that, quote, meaning is an affair of consciousness and not of physical signs or things, end quote. Words on this view are simply evidence for meanings, not independent bearers of meaning in their own right. The intentions of an author are required to imbue them with meaning. A similar view has recently been defended in Irvin. Exactly, Raymond. This is extreme philosophy. Actual intentionalists' approaches to interpretation have been accused of committing an intentional fallacy on the grounds that they inappropriately seek evidence of the work's meaning outside the work itself. This criticism has sometimes been expressed by saying that intentionalism neglects the work itself in favor of close inspection of the author's biography. Yeah, this is what I was saying about the Humpty Dumpty case. Can you just decide that your work can mean whatever you want it, even if, like, clearly you wrote, like, the sky is blue, and you say, well, what I mean by the sky is blue is that my hand is on the table. It's like, well, what the fuck? Okay, however, a true actual intentionalist is most unlikely to be guilty of this charge. As is now widely acknowledged, the best and most detailed evidence for an author's intentions with respect to work meaning is almost certain to be found in the work itself, and thus ascertaining the author's intentions will involve a very close inspection of the work. Yeah, I mean, basically go see what they actually said. And then maybe that actually reflects what they wanted to say. Now, how do you do that? That's the hard part. However, there remain two central problems with the actual intentionalist account. First, it implies that in an important sense, authors can never use words incorrectly. Words always mean just what they are intended to mean. If an author confuses broccoli and cauliflower and actually accidentally uses the word cauliflower when she means to refer to the green vegetable brassica Oleracea italica, then this instance of cauliflower simply means broccoli. The author cannot, in this case or any other, be said to have misspoken in the sense of having failed to generate a work that means what she intends it to mean. This seems counterintuitive, to say the least. Raymond says, that can be on a negative way too, like this part can't be about X because X didn't exist back then. Yeah. Yep. So again, like, this was a thing, it's like times changed and you can like realize stuff that the author doesn't realize. The Daniel Matt, who's one of my favorite streamers, let me give him a shout out. He's streaming again. He took a month off. The Daniel Matt, he is an author. He's a fiction author. And he said he was giving an interview about one of his books because he's like, he writes in French, but he's like award-winning author. And one of the interviewers said, oh, you know, there are these themes in your book. And he was sitting there, he goes, holy shit, those themes are in my book. I didn't realize it. And he was like, that's really, he was like, yeah. The interviewer was asking him about those themes and he was like, I had no idea. Like, he was like making it up on the spot, but he was like, yeah, those themes were in his book. He didn't realize it though. But like when the person said it, he was like, yeah, absolutely, those themes were in my book. So it's like, just because you don't know what you're up to all the time doesn't mean that wasn't like in your head. And as soon as it's pointed out to you, you're like, oh yeah, that's exactly what I meant. But like, yeah, if you don't know the Daniel Matt, he's playing the Blueprints right now. And again, long conversations. He plays slowly as he goes through stuff. So he's a lot of fun if you want to just hang out and like, you know, chat with smart folks. Viper says, I write true crime stories based on fictional crimes that I make up. Pamela Anderson, The Naked Gun, 2025. Well, she's one of the great artists of the last few years, so I take her word for it. Viper says, actually, prior to even finding this paper, I posted a meme in our Discord concerning exactly this topic. Well, I mean, that is a philosophy Discord, so I expect that, relevant things would be discussed there. Raymond says, yeah, also some categories from different traditions can intermix. That doesn't mean Plato knew about Confucius. Yeah. Yes, exactly, Vipers. Yeah, like his NSFW and shitpost is definitely kind of philosophical. Speaking of that meme that I posted that I knew would get a lot of reactions in Aris's Discord, where it said that what's your greatest difficulty at the moment? And it's like, well, knowing not making sure I don't post the wrong meme in the wrong community because of depending where I got it from. Sorry, I don't remember exactly where. I was like, holy fuck. I was like, that's gonna, like, everyone's gonna like this meme. Philosophy of sex. Yes, Aris teaches philosophy of sex. He does. I think he's teaching it, or he taught it. If it, not this semester, he was teaching philosophy of sex, love, sex, and sexuality. So yes. So not safe for work stuff. Yes. If anyone doesn't know our buddy Aris, I should give him a shout out in a minute. Sex of philosophy. Yes, Josephine. Okay, yeah. So generally, to say that like everything you always said is exactly what you meant seems wrong, because that is exactly what you said, and like just correlating what you say with what you mean doesn't seem to make sense. Adam says, and he split the question on what an author intended and on meaning to others, although leaving aside he isn't going to settle with the general dynamics of meaning between anyone or a group, but the work's meaning is in focus. I was like, yes, authors do have unintentional meanings, plus could conceive an unknown category. Conceptual engineering happens by mistake. Interesting paper so far. Yeah, so we're getting there in this book. Thank you for the shout out, Mod. To Aris. If anyone doesn't know Aris, like I said, he's another philosophy streamer, and you can go discuss philosophy stuff over there. He's a good dude. Gustavo Bueno wrote an essay, The Philosophy of the Austrian Apple Cider. Yeah, of course. Asturian apple cider. Yes. Yeah, we're getting somewhere in this paper. So this is a perennial topic, like at least recently. It's like, what do people actually mean? So we'll see what this author has to say. He has a good personality, you think? That's one of the things he does. And he also takes people very seriously. Like, that's one of the best things about his philosophy, is that he takes people seriously. And so, like, the varieties of human experience, he understands something about that, and maybe more than others. And so he takes people seriously, their experience seriously. And if you're going to be in ethics, that's what you want to have in a person, so that, like, you know, he takes people and their experience seriously, so that what matters in your life can be taken seriously too. So that's what matters, at least in that area. Like, in some sense, it matters in logic too, but in a very narrow sense. You have to understand, like, some logical phenomena, and that's part of human experience also, but you need more of it in ethics, probably. Homo sum humani nihil a me alienum puto. I don't know what that is. I hope I didn't say anything illegal right there. Alright, continuing on the paper. The problem generalizes to all instances of malapropism. According to actual intentionalism, righteous indigestion can come to mean righteous indignation just because that is what the author intended it to mean. This reduces to meaninglessness the concept of malapropism, which depends on a divergence between intended meaning and utterance meaning. This is an undesirable result, since even speakers who are guilty of malapropism describe themselves as having erred once the problem is brought to their attention. I am human, nothing human is alien to me. Yeah, thank you, Vipers. So, but that's the point. There's some real freaks out there. There's some bad people out there. And it's like, well, do you actually have their experiences? Maybe, maybe not. But you want to take, like, even if you're not one of the freaks, or you're not like a terrible human being, there's still a huge variety of experience just for everybody else. And it's much wider than I figure. Like, you know, you have your life and other people around you have maybe somewhat similar lives, but like things can get crazy, and it's not even that hard for things to get crazy. So it's like that matters, that you can actually connect with more people. And he says, like in poetry, what do poems mean? What even is, to which, yeah, I think it was him answered, and you ask me, poetry is you. Fair. Yeah. Yeah, and so of course, you can be like, I didn't mean to say that, I meant to say this. And people are like, oh, okay, but you should have said this. It's like, this is a common thing. And so anyone who's just like putting their foot down is like, what I meant. It's like, yeah, I got that. We know what you meant to say, but it's not what you said. Okay, this objection reflects the intuition that generating a work with a particular meaning is, like pole vaulting, something one can fail at. Even if the vaulter's intention is to surmount the bar is perfectly obvious, this does not make the vault successful. Why should things be different with the act of creating a literary work with a particular meaning? Yeah, so you have something you're aiming at. You may fail as a weak draftsman or a bad pole vaulter to actually do that. Weak draftsman, I think, is what Wittgenstein said at either in the introduction to the Tractatus, or was it the Investigations? I think it was the Tractatus. He says, look, this is the best I can do, but like, I hope you see where I'm going, but like, this is the best I can do for now. Autocorrect, exactly, chocolate. Yeah, I mean, it's like, sorry, autocorrect. And everyone knows what that is nowadays. Like, oh, sorry, autocorrect. But like, that's the whole point, is that wouldn't be a thing if people's intention were exactly what they said. Josephine says, people woefully underestimate the variety of life. Yep. I'm like, I come off very normal. I have a very boring life, but I'm like, believe me, I'm one of the freaks out there. Like, normal people do not do the shit I do. So it's like, yeah. And if you try, like, people have tried to do the shit I do, and there's very few people who attempt it, and even fewer who like pull this stuff off. And it's like, it's like, you don't know. And so it's like, I'm one of the weird ones out there. I really am. But like, that's fair. Like, I have a job, I like do my work, and like come back, and then I do this. But like, believe me, you don't, like, if you knew all the bullshit, you'd be like, oh, okay. So, okay. And now for the second problem. The actual intentionalist account threatens the publicity of literary meaning by making words susceptible of meanings that are both idiosyncratic and undetectable. And this is what I was saying earlier about the Humpty Dumpty problem. Can I just define anything willy-nilly, and then nothing I say makes any sense? Might be better. Yeah, well, that's the whole point. Might be better off making standard errors. Absolutely. You don't want to be making crazy errors, because people will not understand it. They just won't. If an author's intentions do not accord with the relevant linguistic conventions, it may be impossible even for a careful reader to detect what those intentions are, and if actual intentionalism is correct, this will render some aspects of the work's meaning inaccessible. Given that literary works are generally presented for the sake of public appreciation, it seems undesirable to suggest that certain aspects of their meaning have never been and never will be accessible even to carefully and well-informed readers, and that assignments of meaning we have made with great confidence based on our knowledge of conventional word meanings may be incorrect, though no available evidence can reveal this to us. Yeah, so the whole point is like, think of the Jabberwocky, which is a nonsense poem. Lewis Carroll was making fun of the people that said, oh, you can figure this out. Like, almost none of the words in that poem mean anything. They don't have any conventional meanings. They just sound like they do. And so he was playing with this whole thing where, oh, what's the intention going on? Well, you seem to almost be able to figure it out, but like none of the words actually make any sense. And so like this is exactly what's kind of going on in the nonsense poem. Hey, what's up, Frank? Aloha. If you make only standard errors, you add nothing to humanity. Well, I mean, yes, but I know you're probably joking. But the idea was, if you want to explain what you're talking about and you make a standard error, people can figure it out. But like, yeah. You want to make the crazy errors, but not in the way you're explaining things. Yeah, mahalo, yes. Have a friend. Raymond has a friend who is a writer. He's actively looking to make literary works mean nothing. Well, again, depending on what your goal is, if it means nothing from the get-go, no one's going to read it. If people think they understand, then maybe you can play with that. And that is the point why I bring up the Jabberwocky, because it makes people feel like they understand. It makes people think they understand, even though the words, even though some of them now we have given definitions to, do not have any meaning. So, but I mean, that's the idea, is that you can do stuff, but you're playing off the idea that the words do have some meaning. Okay, to ward off this criticism, the actual intentionalist may note that intentions are not private mental events. Instead, they are linked in systematic ways to behavior, and for this reason, the nature of an author's intentions can be established by looking at the behavioral evidence. So this is the historical view of what the author means. It has to do with their history. Josephine says, where does intentional nonsense play in the lyric of Syd Barrett by comparison, for example? I have no recall when I'm streaming, so I do not know what the lyrics of Syd Barrett are. But like, yeah. In Viper's notes, comedy is a great example since it is so culturally sensitive. Yeah. So, like a joke and why certain things are funny in some places because they have certain associations, and it's not funny to other people because they don't have the associations. Yeah. Josephine, if you give me some examples of the work of Syd Barrett, because I suck at pop culture and most things, then I could make a stab at it, but I don't know right now. Unfortunately, the relationship between intentions and behavior is not tight enough on any plausible account to make it the case that intentions can always be detected on the basis of behavior. To have an intention is to be disposed to engage in certain behaviors if relevant circumstances obtain, or relevant defeating circumstances fail to obtain. To intend that cauliflower means broccoli is to be disposed, among other things, to give the answer green if asked what color is cauliflower. But if no one ever makes such a query, the author may never engage in a behavior that distinguishes a broccoli intention from a cauliflower intention. An intentionalist who is sensitive to the fact that an agent's intentions are not always revealed through the agent's actual behavior may attempt a different sort of reply. While it may be possible in certain cases for there to be an intention that is never revealed by the author's behavior, the resulting misunderstandings will never be widespread or very serious. They will not be widespread since the ability to generate a meaningful text in the first place requires an extensive mastery of the relevant linguistic conventions and a general will to use the words in accord with their conventional meanings. Yeah, exactly. You have to at least make people think you are like saying something meaningful. Otherwise, no one is going to listen to what you're saying. Like if you start off with nonsense, no one's got any time for that shit. It has to have something that at least sounds like something people want to read or listen to or whatever it is. So if everything's just like from the get-go nonsense, you're not going to get anywhere. Moreover, literary works are complex with many intertextual meaning relations, and in the great majority of cases, an intention that diverges from linguistic convention will be revealed by considering different parts of the work in relation to one another. Any misunderstandings that remain after the work has been carefully studied will not be serious, since an intention that is not richly evident in a variety of ways through the work, and thus detectable by careful consideration of intratextual relationships, must be marginal to the work's meaning. After all, what difference could it make whether a character is growing cauliflower or broccoli in the garden if nothing else arises within the work to reveal this? Josephine says, his solo albums are immensely fragmented, almost impossibly so, but there's meaning behind all of it, and even reference to classical literature. Just give his albums a listen sometime. There are 2 of them. He's the guy who founded Pink Floyd and supposedly went insane, inspiring most of the well-known albums. Aha. Okay, so I have heard about this before. Yeah. Okay. The problem is with this is that everyone seems to like it. And so people do draw inspiration or meaning from it. If it was like pure nonsense, like pure static, that would be different. So like something a person can't really analyze, like just static noise. The fact that it's not just noise or treated as just noise makes me believe that there's more going on there, and that what was just said in the paper here, for example, that things are related to each other in different ways, that people can like dig into that. Now, maybe you're not going to get a single fixed meaning, but that doesn't mean there wasn't something going on that other people won't figure out or could figure out about it. And so that's part of the issue, is that when people start like analyzing it, like what do they like, what do they dislike, people can start like pulling it apart and saying, I like this for these reasons. So it's like, yeah. Just because they're immensely fragmented and almost impossibly so, people still seem to put it together. Like, is it pure noise? Because if it was pure noise, people would move on. If like no one could figure it out. Gordian's knot style, Joseph says he plays with that line, though, intentionally imparts multiple meanings within single sentences or groupings. Yeah. But again, if there's multiple meanings and like overlaid and like pulling in lots of different directions, that's cool. But as long as there's something there for people to dig into, then that, will generate interest. If there's just no way to pull it apart, like a Gordian's knot of a song or whatever, where just looks like there's no way in, that's something else. Yeah. But like, yeah, good example. Okay, the actual intentionalist is probably right to deny that misunderstandings that result from idiosyncratic intentions could be very widespread, but the claim that they will never be very serious is unjustified. The intentionalist contention that important divergences between intention and convention will be revealed by careful consideration of all aspects of the work is most plausible in the case of long works such as novels and plays. In the case of a short literary work such as a contemporary poem, the intratextual meaning relations may be so sparse that there is no reasonable expectation that anomalous word use will be revealed by consulting the rest of the work. Had William Carlos Williams, whether through obstinacy or through error, intended the meaning peaches in using the word plums, nothing else in This Is Just to Say, I guess that's a poem, would have revealed this unconventional word use, but the meaning of the poem would be crucially different on the actual intentionalist view. Even in the case of a novel, a detail that is mentioned only once may on occasion be pivotal to interpretation, and when this is the case, there may be nothing else in the work that reveals an anomaly in usage. Yeah, I mean, if you're going to go with like something like a legal document, you can't at one point just mean and when you mean or. And same in logic. Like, that would be very bad. You'd be like, well, I didn't mean and there, I meant or there. It's like, well, that can completely change the meaning of, like, a legal document. Josephine says, I just love how he repels people to try to find meaning because they do only hear nonsense in it. You don't worry about it, Josephine. You don't have to be sorry. But, like, yeah, you're going to always get stuff like that. And, I mean, I was just like, you don't understand, Mom. This is real music. This is the great stuff. You don't just get it. It's like, yeah. This is the part, it's like, oh, it's not just noise. It was like, people saying metal music was just noise. It's like, no, you have to get it. You may have to, like, do some put some time and effort into understanding what's going on in the music, and then you understand. But like, not all things are for all people. As long as some people get it, that's all that really matters. If no one gets it, you're going to have failed as an artist, basically, and you're just going to disappear. So maybe that's what you want, but most people want their work to at least be understandable by someone. Okay, how serious one takes this problem to be will depend on one's level of commitment to the idea that literary works are public entities whose meanings ought to be in principle accessible to the diligent, well-informed reader. Those, Carol 92, who see literary works as occupying the same spectrum as ordinary conversation, rather than as part of a distinct community enterprise, tend to be relatively unconcerned about the epistemological limitations of intentionalist views. Others, moved by the nature of the practice of art itself, to think that the actual author must always intend the work's meaning to be born in a sufficiently public fashion that he need not personally accompany it to explain the meaning he placed there, will think that even one who takes author's intention seriously should reject the idea that the meaning of a literary work could be epistemically inaccessible in the way that actual intentionalism implies. Regardless of one's take on the epistemological issue, the initial problem that actual intentionalism reduces the notion of authorial error to nonsense seems to place the actual intentionalism at odds with firm and widely held intuitions that do not depend on prior theoretical commitments about the nature of literary works. Yeah, I mean, this is fair. If you're relying everything on the author, then reading the literary work is not going to get you anywhere anyway. So this whole separation between, well, why did you actually write the thing if everything depends on what was in your head? Okay, so that was the extreme version. Now we're going to modest actual intentionalism. Okay, so modest actual intentionalism avoids many of the problems of extreme actual intentionalism by acknowledging that linguistic conventions have an important role to play in fixing meaning. All right, so now we're doing linguistic convention stuff. I guess this goes back for you nerds out there, the Russell Frege view. According, and I guess is this Millian? No, Millian is history shit. Okay. So there's the Russell Frege view for you philosophy nerds. According to the modest intentionalism, linguistic conventions often permit one more than one meaning for a given work. Actually, no, there's also the view nowadays that there are extant conventions, and you're not doing you're not doing expert decisions like what the words mean according to like the experts. You could also do just sort of like the extant conventions in whatever society you're in. But like, yeah. But anyway, hey, what's up, Craftus? Holy shit, it's 5 a.m. I was browsing through some Umberto Eco a few hours ago. Now it's 5 a.m. Yes, as always, if you're in another time zone, please get sleep. I appreciate you being here, though. But like, yeah, hey, Craftus. Viper says, if we want to get fancy about cultural references, Jonathan Swift wrote an essay entitled A Modest Proposal, where he advocates the poor sell their children to the rich for food. Grotesque unless you're aware of the concept of satire and the exploitation of the British attitudes towards the Irish poor of the time. Yeah. And this is the issue. It's like, did Jonathan Swift make some grand mistake in writing A Modest Proposal? No, Jonathan Swift did not make some grand mistake about this. Jonathan Swift knew exactly what he was doing. Okay, when the author's intention coincides with one of these conventional meanings, the author's intent fixes the work's meaning. Okay, so there's some correspondence between what the author means and using a literary device, and that's how you get it, because then everything matches up. Okay, no pun intended? Okay. In cases where the author intends a meaning that is not conventionally permitted, the modest intentionalists may say that the affected portion of the work is meaningless, or that in such cases the work has meanings indicated by convention, and if there is more than one such meaning, it is ambiguous. Okay, so if someone is using words in some unusual way, then maybe it's ambiguous, and because people can't figure it out. Wait, do you live in Transylvania? I mean, do not dox yourself if you do not want to, Craftus. But like, yeah, maybe Craftus is Vlad the Impaler, Dracula. Yes, I'm gonna go with Dracula. Okay, modest intentionalism acknowledges that the author's intention is not sufficient to imbue the work with a meaning it cannot conventionally support, but at the same time preserves the idea that the author of a work does have a degree of special authority with respect to meaning. Yeah, so the author can select the conventions they're using. Yeah. Okay, so Craftus is Dracula, we've confirmed. Both versions of the theory have their difficulties. Okay, so the one where MA1, which is the modest actual intentionalism, where things are just nonsense when you can't figure it out, leaves strange islands of meaninglessness in the midst of works that appear to be meaningful. So if an author intended the meaning green but wrote black instead, MA1 would have us see black as a string of nonsense letters, or perhaps we could see it as a color word but one failing to specify a particular color. On this view, we would be barred from invoking the linguistic conventions that clearly do specify a meaning for the string of letters black in English. This seems an undesirable result, especially given that modest intentionalism admits that conventions have legitimate roles to play in fixing meaning. MAI1 also reintroduces, albeit with a more limited scope, an epistemological problem. It may sometimes be the case that although we have attributed what seems an uncontroversial meaning to the work through the application of linguistic conventions, we are seriously mistaken. Although no evidence may be available to reveal this to us for reasons described above, some aspects of the work is in fact meaningless. Crafter says, never met a vampire in the past 300 years. You know, it happens. Or Logan, yeah, maybe he's in X-Men. MAI2 is in certain respects more attractive. On this approach, when the author's intended meaning is not consistent with some passage in the work, the passage need not be meaningless. Instead, its meaning is fixed by the relevant linguistic conventions unless it will not support any of them. How we should understand the implication of this view depends on how pervasive we take the phenomena of ambiguity to be. How often is it the case that application of the linguistic convention to a work leaves open multiple meanings, such that the author's intention is required to choose among them? Hirsch believed that without appeal to the author's intention, ambiguity is ubiquitous, since his notion of linguistic conventions was a very thin one. Hirsch suggests, for example, that the sentence, "my car ran out of gas," supports the interpretation, "my Pullman dashed from a cloud of argon." But we might hold instead that ambiguity will be relatively unusual, since A, within a literary work, context tends to rule out most meaning alternatives, and or B, linguistic conventions, perhaps combined with relevant and widely held background knowledge, are more robust than Hirsch believed, such that they typically indicate a salient or default meaning and not just a bunch of strictly permissible meanings that are roughly on par with one another. A more robust notion of linguistic convention will seem attractive insofar as one tends to think that the appropriate interpretation of "my car ran out of gas" in the absence of contextual defeaters is "my automobile's supply of gasoline was completely depleted." Yeah, I mean, you can have like a list of like what you think the conventional meaning of stuff is. You can like rank them. But then again, how you do that is going to be arbitrary on sort of like how you interpret ambiguous stuff. Crafter says, jokes aside, might say we do vampire hunting's fun. I only met once a sentient vampire and I let it go. I was not paid enough for it. And even if all the money wouldn't have killed it. Yeah. A vamoire? I don't know what a vamoire is. Maybe it's vampire. But that's cool. I mean, I was watching the Vampire the Masquerade streams on Twitch, and in that world, there's a lot of vampires, and they have a very strict, secrecy policy. So, could be. If we take ambiguity to be pervasive, then on MAI2, the author's intention will have an important role to play in staving it off. But an objector may wonder, why should we allow the author that the author can wave away ambiguity by intentional fiat, rather than doing what a competent author is supposed to do, namely change the work in such a way that multiple meanings are no longer conventionally permitted? And I can just hear the philosopher in this. It's like, shut the fuck up, philosophers. Actually mean what you said as opposed to saying stupid shit. So, this is a little bit of a... I can just feel this sentence, in philosophy. They're like, stop with the bad writing and actually mean what you say. They look hideous? Okay. Moreover, the epistemological problem seems to rear its head again. in cases where some passage admits of multiple meanings, there may be nothing in the work that tells us what the author intended. Finally, in cases where the author's intention is unconventional, the problem of excessive ambiguity may return, though such cases may be rather uncommon since, for reasons discussed above, the author's intentions usually do coincide with meanings that are conventionally permitted. What I don't get what you are narrating? This paper is talking about author's intentions. Yeah, you're coming from a radical left. Okay, this is talking about author's intentions with respect to literary works. So, is the work of some literature, I mean, I guess philosophy would fall under it, up to the author's meanings, like what they intended? Or is there something in the work itself that determines what it means? And we're discussing different areas on that. Thank you, Vipers. So yeah, I mean, this doesn't have to be like a left or right issue. It's a question of interpretation of artworks. English, motherfucker, do you speak it? What? If ambiguity is not very pervasive, then we have a truly modest intentionalism on which there are few cases in which we must appeal to the author's intention to establish the work's meaning. On this construal of MAI2, there will rarely be more than one meaning permitted by convention, and the work will bear the unique conventionally permitted meaning whether the author intends it or not, since in cases where the author intends some other meaning, MAI2 has the work revert back to the conventional meaning in any case. Crafter says, I think that the writing comes from the meaning of dialecticism, material, and historical. Sure. So, but again, that wouldn't appeal to the author's intention at that point. And those are things outside the author. So you're going to talk about how the work interacts with the world. And that those are public things. And so this is about the intentions of the author, and that stuff will come in later, I think. Okay. On such a construal, MAI2 begins to look very similar to conventionalism to be discussed below, the view that the meaning of a literary work is fixed simply by considering the work in relation to the relevant linguistic conventions. And the linguistic conventions might actually be dialectical materialism and historical stuff. What's up, Cliff? How you doing? So, yeah. The only time that the author's intentions will play any role in fixing meaning on this view is in the unusual case where ambiguity persists after we have carefully studied the relevant information supplied by context and robust linguistic conventions. And this raises two questions. First, if the work allows for more than one meaning in such circumstances, why should we refrain from saying that the work is simply ambiguous? Why is it not possible to have unintended ambiguities just as it is possible to have unintended conventionally determined meanings? Second, once we have seen that linguistic conventions can supply meanings even in cases where they do not correspond to the author's intentions, why should we embrace a theory that proposes such an odd disjunction between how meaning is fixed? Perhaps we should prefer the more elegant approach offered by a theory suggesting that meaning is determined in a similar way in every instance. You thought the author was declared dead? Yeah. So, this is in the wake of the author being declared dead, of course. Crafter says, I really don't get this article. Is about complaining how authors are or are not gods. I mean, we have to see where we're going to go, because they said they're doing the philosophy thing here. They're doing the philosophy thing of going through all the other theories and being like, look, this doesn't quite get at what we want, or there's problems. Now, that's fine for writing a nice paper of philosophy. It is not going to win you any literary awards, but like this will get you published in a philosophy journal and in a way that will, be good for teaching, because this journal is actually also, I believe, more of an overview journal. So it gives you an overview of a topic, even while making a philosophical contribution. So they're giving us an overview here. And that's just kind of the style of writing of this paper, which is, I mean, you may not love it, but like, that's just kind of what's going on. And I mean, I know, chat, you're like just having a little bit of fun with this author, but I do want to explain what's going on here for anyone else. Justin says, I suppose the vampire once, whose friend had told me about him. I just started asking him about it in a room of people and staff in the VIP area of the nightclub. I was sincerely friendly about it and curious. He was livid and glared at me so hard, but I could tell in my eyes I just hurt him really bad if he came for me. I'm a dude, by the way, 260 pounds. There you go. It's funny because open innocence and pit against secretive predation in a more violent individual. So he had to just stare at me and smile and entertain the questions. That's funny. Yeah, my voice is scratchy. I'm sorry. Hey Shane, how you doing? Shane asks, is the Viper in the room with us now? I don't know. Depends how good their cloaking ability is. Crafter says, yeah, but they said a lot of fallacies in hopes of points for auto self-victimization. Yeah. Did I kiss Bevilacqua or something? I've just been acting like an asshole. That's all it is, and that's why my voice is scratchy. And I also, you got to remember, I don't have to talk most of my days. So when I'm on stream, I'm talking way more than I talk usually. So if I don't talk, for a few days, like I don't talk so much, I will have trouble talking. Like I just will. Let's see. Shout out the Shane. If anyone here doesn't know our buddy Shane McGinnis, he's a professor of sociology and history, and he's working through some sociological writings on his stream lately. He also does a lot of history streams. History of Israel was a recent series, and maybe it's still going. I don't know. I don't remember. But you can ask him history stuffs, and it's cool, and you can learn stuff over there, and it's good. So yeah, if you don't know Shane, you want other smart discussions and fun streams you could talk about history and sociology in the world, hit up Shane. Okay, but yeah, if anyone doesn't know what we're talking about, does the meaning of a literary work depend on what the author meant it to? And now we're moving over to anti-intentionalism, so no, and conventionalism, saying there's things out in the world and that's how we determine meaning. Okay. In response to a number of concerns raised above, conventionalism assigns meaning without considering the author's semantic intentions, whether actual or hypothetical. To know what a work means on this view, we need only consider it in light of the relevant linguistic conventions. And perhaps some appropriate background knowledge. I was about to say, you need the history at this point, so you need background knowledge about such things as the places and historical events mentioned in the work. So yeah, it's not just convention, that you're going to need history of some sort. It just doesn't work on convention alone, unfortunately. Because how do you place the conventions? The conventions have to be historically situated. Details. Okay, once it is admitted that linguistic conventions play a role in the determination of meaning, the conventionalist suggests it should be admitted that the conventions can do the whole job, and without incurring any of the difficulties of extreme or modest actual intentionalism. Crafter says, I think it means on the author's response, but that's only the pivotal point. Of course, people will interpret based on the times they're living in. Yeah. I mean, we're now just pivoting to fuck the author. They're dead. Okay, we've already seen that by invoking a robust notion of linguistic convention, we can answer the Hirschian concern that linguistic conventions are not sufficient to determine meanings in most cases. And in the unusual case where ambiguity persists after robust linguistic conventions have been applied, the conventionalist may A, simply say that the work is ambiguous, or B, fix a determinate meaning by invoking something other than the author's intentions. So, for example, the conventionalist might advocate choosing whichever meaning will imbue the work with the most aesthetic value. And in philosophy, we have the principle of charity. So sometimes ancient philosophers or people who we just don't have a lot of information about, we may say, okay, there's a bunch of different ways we could take the text. But you're trying to make them be useful. So it may not be aesthetic value, it may be philosophical value. There's other things you can do, depending on what you count as valuable in an area. That's a logical fallacy there. Where? In yours, or what I said, or this person said? Or what I said. Let me know if I fucked something up. I fucked shit up a lot. Okay, the most compelling objections to conventionalism gravitate around the concern that forcing literary works into a one-size-fits-all mold is not appropriate. First of all, a work may be deployed within more than one linguistic community, and the robust linguistic conventions of these communities may differ or even conflict. In such a case, how are we to determine which conventions are applicable? Depending on how fragmented linguistic communities are taken to be, this concern may turn out to be quite serious. Conventions may differ from one city or neighborhood to the next, such that different meanings are generated for the same work read by competent readers in Oklahoma City and in Wichita. The worry might be averted by downgrading to a thin notion of convention, such that the only rules that count as linguistic conventions are very widely shared, but of course this will reintroduce the problem of ubiquitous ambiguity, since thinly construed conventions often aren't sufficient to rule out all but one meaning. On A and B points, not what you said? Okay. First of all, we have data, so A drops in still. Okay. Another possibility would be to say that the relevant conventions are determined by the author's own linguistic community, but an author may belong to more than one linguistic community, and in any case, this problem reintroduces an appeal to the author that conventionalism, especially in its more extreme versions, is designed to eschew. While hypothetical intentionalism and to a lesser degree modest actual intentionalism also rely on linguistic conventions to do part of the work of fixing meaning and are thus susceptible to a similar worry, they can more comfortably employ the strategy of solving the problem by appeal to the author. Should be a C point where the books are used as data even though they are fictional. Yeah, I mean... you gotta use, they say you use all the linguistic resources available to you. So I think the author has like something going on here. They're not like, maybe that's unfair. Maybe that's unfair to you. You want to say like they are saying that you get to appeal to like as many resources in the linguistic community as possible. And they've said things like that here. Now, how far that goes, maybe that, that needs to be defined. So like, yeah, you need to use all the things as much data as you can, but where that ends may be a good question. Okay. Second, it is unclear that the conventionalists can allow for the possibility of an author's using words in an idiosyncratic or unconventional way. Conventionalism seems to require that words and sentences bear meanings that are permitted by linguistic conventions, whether thinly or robustly construed. But it is not uncommon in literary works for an author to use a word in an idiosyncratic way, that is, a way not permitted by linguistic conventions on any construal, while also providing ample intratextual clues to the idiosyncratic meaning. And I feel like this is also, they're basically accusing philosophers here, because like this is the sort of thing philosophers do. We define meanings, and then like that's an intratextual clue that says, oh, we're going to define this word in a different way. So it's like clearly on philosophy texts, this is going to be a problem. Okay. An author may, it seems, coin a word or use a word with a meaning different from or in addition to its conventional meanings, as long as other aspects of the work or aspects of the author's other works provide evidence of this idiosyncratic usage. Graf just says, like, for example, do we know that Shakespeare wrote that based on his cultural timeline, a current timeline, or maybe he just wrote it based on a fantasy from his mind? Yeah, and this again, where do you draw the line for what you're drawing on? So I think that's a legit criticism here. Where exactly and what counts as the right history, the appropriate history, and like where the sources were drawn. But like that's the problem with the conventionalism, and I think the author is kind of bringing this out now, saying, look, is it idiosyncratic like a fantasy from the mind here? Yep, cool. Okay. It is not clear that conventionalism can account for our tendency in such cases to see works as having meanings that are not conventionally permitted. Of course, it is through the application of linguistic conventions to a work that we uncover the evidence that a word is used unconventionally, but it is not clear that a full-blown conventionalism can justify using this evidence as the basis for generating a new local rule opposed to the relevant linguistic convention that will allow us to assign the appropriate idiosyncratic meaning. Since brilliant idiosyncrasies of meaning are among the chief delights of some literary works, inability to account for them is a serious problem in a theory of literary meaning. Oh yeah, speaking of, since we have Shane here, like someone like Tolkien, who made a giant fantasy world with lots of meanings, like in different languages. Like again, if everything was linguistic convention, how would you create like a whole new world out of like our old conventions, if everything was stuck to the old conventions. It just doesn't work. So it can't be it just can't be solely conventional. Now this is weird over here. I think they actually brought this topic up, hypothetical intentionalism, before they actually said that this was the next section. So like they said hypothetical intentionalism like over here somewhere, but I didn't know what it was. This is just like it's down here. That's why this picked up in 2022. AI. Oh, that's a good point. Yeah, what's the meaning of all the crap that AI is talking about? So now we've got, yeah. So Vipers had mentioned that this is from 2006, but it got more play in 2022. So now we've got things just making shit up, our machines, and how do we understand them? And this is sort of saying, okay, what's the conventions and what are the meanings? You're right. Kraft says, no matter how many times you imagine, it's still the same. Your phone just died. You're back. Well, welcome back, Josephine. Concerns about idiosyncratic meaning point to a broader issue. Literature is written by authors, not by generic sense generators cranking out text in accord with linguistic conventions. Yeah, so I didn't get there, but like that's exactly why this became relevant to the current audience. To understand a work appropriately, perhaps we must see it as the product of an author, a particular human being in a certain socio-historical context, who writes with a certain style, tends to use the words in a certain way, brings certain background knowledge and experiences to bear, and has written a body of works which may inform one another. Extreme actual intentionalism, of course, dealt with these concerns about authorship, since the intentions relevant to fixing meaning were those of the actual historical personage who produced the work in question. Conventionalism, though, appears to jettison this sense of an author as a unified individual whose meanings may not be capturable by applying general conventions. Yeah. Like Shane says, language ends up trapping us mentally. It can, absolutely. Viper says syntactic versus phenomenological understanding. Yeah. So does this correspond to a human's experience, that's the phenomenology, or is it just the relation of the words being likely next to each other, and that's the syntactic? Okay, Crafter says, also Neo, I love reading safe, not because of the genre, but how the author seemed speculative fiction, because it seems so close to reality. Sure. And that's what we were talking about earlier too. What did you mean there? Was it your intention, but autocorrect bites you in the ass? Have you imagined me? Okay, Bowser. Shane says, language gets infinitely more difficult when we start translating stuff. Just because perro means dog in Spanish doesn't mean that Spanish concept of dog is the same as the English concept of dog. Yeah. But like, yeah, this is why this paper seems like it is much more relevant. All of us, well, it's now becoming popular because it's dealing with all these issues that we have the LLMs that are using language in one way, but it's not exactly in the way we understand people to be doing it. Governance that can be understated extends so far into foundational. Yes. Trevor says, I'm dyslexic, relying on autocorrect, but I have in multiple languages. Believe me, there's a lot of people where English is not their first language here. Like, don't worry about it. Like, it's not a problem. Like, there's people with other medical issues. It happens. No worries. If I can figure out what you mean, that's what's important. Believe me, I am not interested in the formalisms like, oh, you didn't say it the right way. I'm interested, did you have a point? Yeah. Okay. Hypothetical intentionalism attempts to bring together the strengths of intentionalism and conventionalism while avoiding their weaknesses. Though hypothetical intentionalism is often spoken as though it were one theory, there are in fact two species. If author HI, so actual author high, suggests that the meaning of a work is determined by the best hypotheses that a careful, appropriately informed audience would form about the author's actual intentions. Postulated author HI suggests that the meaning of the work is determined by the intentions that a careful, appropriately informed audience would attribute to a postulated author. So this is why we've got the LLMs. Some postulated author who, while resembling the actual author in many respects, is also assumed to possess additional characteristics such as full competence in the language that allow the postulated author's intentions to account as fully as possible for the work's features. And here we go. This is exactly why this appeals nowadays, because we treat the LLMs like a postulated author who have lots of information and know what they're talking about. Okay. So actual author hypothetical intentionalism and postulated author hypothetical intentionalism have a number of features in common. Both suggest that meaning is fixed not by anyone's actual intentions, but by attributions of authorial intention made by a competent audience, and the methods of attribution recommended by the two views coincide to a significant degree. Both agree that the work should be considered in light of the relevant linguistic conventions, probably robustly construed, and background knowledge, and that informing hypotheses about the author's intentions with regard to a given work is appropriate to consult the author's other works as well as public declarations about the works, though statements of intention contained within these declarations need not be taken as decisive. Consideration of publicly available biographical information about the author is also permitted by both views, though they, in particular actual author hypothetical intentionalism, will tend to eschew consultation of such things as private journals on the grounds that statements made privately cannot determine the meaning of a public entity such as literary work. Yeah, so this is why this all makes sense now. It's like, what do we think of a person, an actual person or a potential person that would have said this stuff? So yeah, I was going to say something else, but I forgot what I was going to say. Oh well. Adam says, even given the order of placement of historical linguistic rules learned by an author, it seems like the paper doesn't have to dive that deep into epistemic reasons. Look at the poet philosophers and saying they've recreated how meaning is created, but are merely selecting a meaning for some string of symbol or artifact which is hitherto unknown. Author, if being asked, could only say, yes, it has significance, and she didn't intend for anyone to know. Meaning can be broken, though, learning a pattern. Yeah. The question, I guess, for this author is not that we know it, it's that where are we getting the meaning out of, I guess. So it's like, yeah, the author might say none of this meant, but like we could read more stuff into it than we should. And if everyone agrees that we should read more stuff into it with, like, say, an LLM saying something, and everyone gets something out of it because we do like using our AIs nowadays, like, what's the problem with saying we get something out of it and there is meaning there? Oh, this is what I was going to say. Remember, Reddit data is where most of the LLMs were trained. So the authorial history is Reddit mods. Keep that in mind. Yeah. So, like, yeah. There's going to be a history there, but what that history is kind of amorphous, actually. Okay. However, actual author hypothetical intentionalism and postulated author hypothetical intentionalism also diverge in important respects. The point of the method, according to actual author hypothetical intentionalism, is to form hypotheses based on relevant publicly available evidence about what the real historical person with a particular set of characteristics would most likely have meant in generating a given literary text in a particular context. Postulated author hypothetical intentionalism, on the other hand, is not concerned with the intentions of a real historical person. Again, this is why this is getting picked up right now. Instead, the aim of postulated author hypothetical intentionalism is to construct an idealized author whose intentions are able to account as fully as possible for the work's features. What do we have here, Vipers? You kind of want to make a bot just to spam just to make the billionaires lose money? Oh, well, there are people who have stuff that make the billionaires lose money. Yes. I'm not going to show that just for obvious reasons if you click on it, but it is a problem where Reddit people have been poisoning what they write in Reddit to poison the AIs. And so it tells you to do things you shouldn't. But you can't? Well, other people are way ahead of you. There's definitely black hole like training things that just screw up the they just lead the AIs, the LLMs around circles with garbage data. So it's people are doing it. Okay, so yeah, so this is, you're not concerned with of a real historical person. Instead, the aim of postulated author HI is to construct an idealized author whose intentions are able to account as fully as possible for the work's features. The idealized author is fully competent in her use of language, or at least as competent as she can be given aberrations found within the work, and is aware of all the meaning potential of the work she has generated and of its relationships to other works, historical events, and so forth. To the extent possible, postulated author HI explains all the features of the work in terms of the agency of this postulated author, not in terms of accident or error, even if our knowledge about the actual author makes accident or error more plausible as real-life explanations. Postulated author HI will, for example, allow us to identify an instance of illusion on the grounds that the postulated author is fully aware of meaning relations among different works, even if the actual author did not intend it. For this reason, postulated author HI might be said to allow us to appreciate literary works more fully. It permits us to make sense of, and thus assign meaning to, features of the work that, in relation to the actual author's intentions, may have been purely accidental. Let's see. Oh, Kraft says, not because of technical reason, because I would do more harm to people already enslaved. Yeah, that's fair. I mean, maybe that's not the best way to fight back against the current tech overlords. Yeah. Viper says, vibe code in Google AI Studio. That's what it's designed for or not. Yeah, that's what it's designed for. My buddy at work, who I was talking about earlier, he has a buddy that works for Meta. And he says basically the guy's job, and this guy gets paid oodles of money, is he just prompts the AI generator and then like looks at the code and just like kind of like watches the AI churn out code. And that's what his job is basically to like, you know, just make sure the AI is churning out the right code according to his prompts to solve his stuff. But he say that's basically what a software engineer job is now, is just to just watch the AI and make sure it's doing what you want it to. So many big words for an article with no context. Yeah, well, to be fair, this article hasn't used that many complex words, or at least fancy philosophical words. Like they're using postulated here. But like that's, you know, they're not actually using that many technical words. They're trying to keep it as conventional as possible in this paper for probably the obvious reasons that they don't want there to be any ambiguity here. That's one thing I was going to say about this later, but it really looks like they went as conventional as possible to explain all the things, and maybe because they didn't want any ambiguities in there, what they were saying. So many biff words for an article with no context. Don't get philosophical, just say what it meant. Yeah. I don't know. I mean, I think the paper's saying what they mean. Well, like there is context to the paper. I think that's like, there is a history here. I wouldn't say it has no context. Viper says, in fairness, old programming was just leveraging Cunningham's law on Stack Overflow. I mean, it's true. I mean, old programming was just copying shit off Stack Overflow. So I don't remember what Cunningham's law is. Probably just that smarter people already solved the problem out there. But yeah. Well, I mean, the big problem is that this is killing all the, you know, intro level programming jobs. Crafter says, I think that the end is blaming the readers for not understanding the article. It's just a Humst problem. States that the best way to get the right answer is not to ask questions but posting the wrong answer. Sure. Okay. Yeah. I don't think that's fair, Craftus. I mean, I know something about this topic. I don't see anything here as blaming the reader. Like, they were saying there is no one reader. It's like if people are analyzing, and it's people, not just a person. Granted, one person might not understand it, but like that's okay. Not everyone's going to understand all the stuff. Again, the idea is that given a literary community, if we're trying to understand something, then we could use this as a way to try to understand it. It says it in the last paragraph. Well, okay, I haven't got there yet. If you're jumping ahead, I mean, this is not blaming the reader. Like, where in this? You're not blaming the reader here. It's allowing us to make sense of this. Okay. Hypothetical intentionalism in both its forms avoids the epistemological problems associated with the extreme and modest actual intentionalism, since it holds meaning to be fixed by competent readers. Yeah, competent readers. Yeah, maybe you're like angry about competent readers, but like again, there's things I'm not competent to read, and if I don't get it, yeah, that will be on me because there's things that are over my head. But that's not a problem. That's not. You don't have to write all things for all people. Yeah. But I mean, that's okay. Like, not everything's going to be for everything. person angry about it? Yeah, sure. But again, I'm only so competent. Like, I know what I'm good at and what I'm less good at. Like, that's not a problem, though. Okay. Fixed by competent readers, best hypotheses or attributions of intention, which are in principle epistemically available. It also allows for the possibility that a work may bear an unconventional meaning as long as the work and other publicly available information provide evidence of this meaning. Yeah. Bowser says, I know that I know nothing. Well, we've got Socrates in chat. Very impressive. Both actual intentionalists and conventionalists have suggested that the distinctions between hypothetical intentionalism and their own views are arbitrary. Actual intentionalists suggest that actual author hypothetical intentionalism is arbitrary in prohibiting the consultation of the author's private communications. After all, if one is interested in forming reliable hypotheses about the actual author's intentions, why restrict access to some of the relevant evidence? Okay, and so I think this is going back to your earlier comment. Where do you actually stop reading in history? What counts as relevant? So this is, I think, getting back to what you were saying earlier. Baptist. Actual author hypothetical intentionalism appeals to a view that literary works have been released into the public domain and their meanings are thus subject to publicity constraints. But actual intentionalists, who see literary communication as more closely analogous to ordinary conversation, find this publicity assumption unconvincing. In related vein, the actual intentionalists will point out that ordinary hypotheses are of interest only insofar as they track truth. Why then should we take the hypothesized intention rather than the actual intention to establish the meaning when there is evidence to indicate that the two are different? This worry becomes especially acute when it is pointed out that insofar as the hypothesized and genuine intentions differ, the hypothesized intentions cannot have played any causal role in generating the work's features. This makes it especially hard to see how the hypothesized intentions could help to explain the work's features. You don't have to write about all, then don't complain about all people. That's my point. Oh, okay. Okay, since postulated authors' hypothetical intentions aim is explicitly to give a normative rather than causal explanation of the work's features, and since postulated author hypothetical intentionalism clearly does not aim to track the intentions of the actual author, it is less likely to draw this sort of fire from the actual intentionalists. It is most vulnerable to challenges from conventionalists who suggest that postulated author hypothetical intentionalism is really just a sophisticated conventionalism. After all, the conventionalist might ask, what is it to assume that the author uses language competently, but to hold that the meanings intended by the author are conventional ones, or at least that an examination of the text in light of the relevant conventions will reveal the intended meanings? Moreover, the conventionalists might say a charitably construed conventionalism can allow that the author's personal history and other works affect which conventions are relevant and thus affect the work's meaning. Although early conventionalist views eschewed all reference to author, a sophisticated conventionalism need not do so. Again, where is the limit of what you count as background information? That's, I guess, what you can. It's either you're making stuff up or you get to actually go look as much as possible and then try to figure it out. So what's the count of finding all the information and figuring it out versus making one up and you're just calling it a hypothetical? Let's get to the materialism dialectic. That's how I explained in my opinion. Okay. Well, again, if you're taking that one theory as a theory of meaning, I can guarantee you someone's poked a hole in it. Like, that's just how people are. Now, you are free to have your preferred theory of meaning, though. Crafter says, so he basically says that the people won't listen to a work of writing, but he doesn't say anything about the people. Well, it's the question is, how are we as competent speakers and readers of a language supposed to take it? You know, of course there's going to be background knowledge here. They say there's going to be background knowledge. Yeah, I mean, there's no problem with that. But, I mean, if you want to situate the people in history stuff too, but then you're going to have the exact same problem. How do you situate people in history? And of course you can say, well, dialectical materialism, but there's other ways to do that. So it's not like this is the only one way and the one way only. Okay, the conventionalist may well be right to suggest that a conventionalism worthy of the name could converge on postulated author hypothetical intentionalism, but this is hardly a criticism of postulated author hypothetical intentionalism. Hypothetical intentionalism appropriately draws our attention to the fact that literary works are produced by authors whose identities may legitimately affect meaning, partly by determining which linguistic conventions are relevant to a given work. Postulated author hypothetical intentionalism goes one step further, allowing us to see a given work as having all the meaning properties that a maximally competent author would have intended it to have, even if some of these clearly were not intended by the author. This move will be attractive to those who believe that a literary work, once released to an audience, is an autonomous entity which can transcend boundaries imposed by the mind of the historical person who created it. Yeah, and so here we go. We're finally getting to the kicker. Why would you do this? Is because you don't think it's entirely up to the author once something is out in the world. And there we are. That's true. Yeah. Thumbs up can be very different in different countries. Receiver of communication matters. Yep. Okay, conclusion. So we just this page. And good, because 2.5 hours and I start dying. Conclusion. Extreme actual intentionalism is generally thought unattractive because it does not acknowledge that linguistic conventions play an important role in constraining work, meaning modest actual intentionalism will be most attractive to those persuaded by the idea that literary communication and ordinary conversation lie on a continuum and who are not bothered by the theoretical inelegance of a disjunctive view about how meaning is fixed. Depending on whether linguistic conventions are thinly or robustly construed, modest actual intentionalism will inherit some of the problems of extreme actual intentionalism or converge to a significant degree with conventionalism. Conventionalism should be attractive to those persuaded that literary works are public entities, such that their meanings can be neither enhanced nor diminished by the aspirations or limitations of their authors. Yeah, so maybe Craftus, you're just a conventionalist and you want to say the convention is dialectic materialism. And that's fine. Hypothetical intentionalism preserves the idea of the publicity of literary works while allowing that the identity of the author as a person with a certain life story and possibly a body of other works may play a role in fixing the work's meaning. Postulated author hypothetical intentionalism may be equivalent to a sophisticated conventionalism that permits appeal to publicly accessible information about the author's life and works. In this view, by allowing that a work has the meaning that would have been intended by a maximally competent author may serve to enhance appreciation of literary works. In some instances, this will amount to giving a work credit for meaning properties that it has by sheer accident, and some, notably those with actual intentionalist leanings, will complain that such credit is given where none is due. Okay, there we go. Yep. And as always, if you've stuck around to the end, you get to rate the work. And you rate the work by spamming some emotes. So if you are here, you are now welcome to spam some emotes. You can see them below me here. And they are kind of make up a rubric. So if you thought this was a fun paper and gave you some fun ideas, give it a brain dance. Spelling and capitalization do count here. If you thought this talked about existential or artistic drama, give it a Nog scream. Ouroboros, a Nog Oro for deep ancient ideas. Nog knife slicing and dicing arguments. Nog navel gazing only for academics. Nog turd for all style no substance, still poop underneath. And Nog grapes for big claims that shrivel up. You can also use the global vote yay and vote nay of Twitch, and my vote meh for things that are just kind of meh. Note, I do calculate an overall score. Anything in the green just kind of pushes the number up. Anything in the red makes it go down, and the vote meh actually makes it go to the middle. So, feel free to spam some emotes now. Crafter says, in actuality, radical left, what I've seen from this article is dividing views between dumb and smart and choosing who they write. Yeah, there you go. You give it a 1 in 10, good for read for liberals. All right, fair. I mean, you are free to use the emotes if you want to rate the paper. Laughing Jesus gave it a yay. Yeah, so, I mean, again, there are always political implications for how we interpret documents and people and how they relate to stuff. So it's like if you're looking for a ideological stance like that, that matters. Vipers gave it a meh and a navel gazing and a scream to balance it out a bit. Yeah, I mean, like I said, this felt like an overview paper. They didn't take a strong stance, but I said earlier that the journal this is in, I think this is kind of the papers they like to publish, are these overview sort of things where you get sort of insight into different ideas. And that's okay. So it's like, yeah. You're too old to spam emotes, but I can say I love you all. Well, you can say I love you too. But you can spam emotes emotes are not, you don't have to be ageist about, the emotes are not ageist. I mean, I made them. They're my emotes. Josephine says, I wasn't here for enough of it, so your vote wouldn't be fair or possibly accurate. That doesn't really matter. You're on Twitch. You do realize you're on Twitch, and you don't have to be 100% fair. But, I respect your decision. Yeah. So, I had not thought about the hypothetical intentionalism. That seems like an interesting thing. Where would I put this? This is not, fanciest work, but it's, a good overview piece. I kind of liked it as that went. So what will I say? You enjoyed my streams. Glad you finished one. Hey, I'm glad you're here. I'm sorry I kept you up late. I know it's early in the AM for you now. And getting later in the AM for you now. Let's see. Yeah, I'm with Vipers here. Let's give it some screams because we're talking about that. But yeah, we're not talking about anything crazy either. So yeah, I'm kind of going to go like this. I'm not going to give him a navel. I thought there's more people that might be interested by this than just philosophers. It's not crazy. Luminance, what's up? How you been? You get a yay, a knife, and a scream? Yeah, that seems fair too. You might like this more than, for whatever reason, you might like it more for different reasons. So yeah, it's fair. If anyone doesn't know our buddy Luminance, we'll give him a shout out. Fast. Luminance is another philosopher streamer, trying to, get shit done. So little hiatus on the streams, but Luminance has been reading through Kant's Critique of Pure Reason, and trying to explain. So no, what do you mean no? I heard a bit of this in the back while working. Thank you for the lurk. I do appreciate that. So I was like, yeah. But yeah, go give Luminance a follow if you want more philosophy content. Not a philosophy loser? Yeah, sure. Let's see. So yeah, there's a few people over here. I appreciate everyone here. Okay, so if anyone else wants to get their rating in, please do so. Now you got 60 seconds left. Yeah, Adam says for a Twitch review. Yeah, not bad. Cool. Adam's in. Thank you. I'll be planning to be back next month. Cool. That's awesome, Luminance. Awesome. Yeah. So, I mean, overall, not a bad paper. It gave an overview, gave some insights. I did not think about this hypothetical. I've thought about this before, but I hadn't one of the nice things about philosophy is when someone says it well, I thought they said the stuff well in this paper, it says, okay, these are the options and I understand them and it's better than what I had thought of.